Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you the books and resources we used for our Africa unit study. This complements our Silk Road unit as well as our medieval European unit that we've been working on for the past at least year to 2 years. In exploring other parts of the world, we found that each of these different areas needed its own unique unit. And so that's what happened with this one. We've completed it, and I want to share with you what we liked, what I recommend, and the projects that we did. So the first thing I actually want to show you is my lesson plan book. It is just a composition book, and this is where I have started putting in just the ideas that I want to do for our units. And I want to show you our medieval Africa, the ideas that we had or the books that we wanted to use and the projects that we wanted to do. I've since been told that it's not really accurate to call it medieval Africa. We can call it a West Africa unit, and we can show the range of time, but medieval Africa, or the word medieval, is bit more, it's coined for Europe, and so Africa at this time wasn't going through a medieval time. It was actually going through a prosperous time. It was very wealthy and very progressive. So I've written down the books that we got specifically for this unit. I wrote down the crafts and activities and projects we wanted to do, the games that we intended to play, or the toys that we wanted to have for this unit. I definitely want to get into the kitchen. That's something that's very important to me when we're doing our history units especially. And then I continued here because these were the books that I specifically got for this unit. But I went ahead and I pulled the books that I already had in our home library. And I think only one of them actually pertain to West Africa. The rest of these books have to do with the Sahara, East Africa, and some other parts. And they were picture books. They didn't really contain historical content, but they were really important for me to add to this unit so that I could have more picture books. And also, it was just really enjoyable to have things that were, picture books, enjoyable to read. And then one other book, this Safari Animals, this ended up being like a really big hit for my daughter, especially. I'm going to show you that one as well. Okay, so I just made little check marks and pencil for all the things that we were able to read or the projects that we were able to accomplish. So we did really well with this unit. We covered everything that we wanted to do. Let me just flip the page over for you. So we were able to read all those books. Honestly, reading a bunch of picture books actually doesn't take too much time, so it's a great way to, I don't want to say bulk up your unit, but to feel good about getting some stuff done, because some of these books were really long and they took multiple days, even weeks to read. When it came to our projects, I was well prepared. However, some of these took a long time to do, and other ones, because they were brand new projects for me, we didn't use kits for these. I hesitated in doing them because I hadn't done them before. They were, I didn't know how they were going to turn out, if it was going to be successful or not. And I am super glad that we made our sandstone mustard because it was fabulous. I'm really excited to have this as part of our unit. You can find video tutorials on all of the things that we did with this unit. You can also check out the blog post that accompanies this unit. That link is down in the description box below. You'll find all the projects that we did, more pictures, the books and resources, all on that blog post. We also made a stone gaba with plaster of Paris, and we used a kit from our medieval Europe unit to do this, and I'll show you that as well, and then a couple other things here. So you can find that as well on the blog post. I also want to show you that the learning was expressed in one of three ways. We either cooked and ate together, we either did a hands-on project, or we did written narration with illustrations. Because this unit, our Africa unit, was born out of another unit, my son's main lesson book starts with Marco Polo, and then it goes into Mansa Musa. And so he's done all of his written narrations for many of the books that he's gone over, and some of them didn't exactly pertain to this unit, but that's another story, and he still has some illustrations to do. So I'm going to show you these things, and as I show them to you, I'm going to clear some way. The first thing I want to show you is the project that I am most pleased with. It is a sandstone mosque, and this was never attached really well, so that's a little disappointing, but that was the front door. We used dowels and we stained them for the external scaffolding, and we used a clay that I felt like the color was going to resemble some of the clay structures that were constructed in West Africa. So let me put this aside. It's not very sturdy because it hasn't been fired, and we don't intend to fire it, so it can start to disintegrate, or if we get water on it, it can get ruined. So that is something that you might consider when you're doing a project like that. Okay, the other project we did is our Kaaba made out of bricks. That we used bricks from our castle building kit. And so we used the plaster of Paris. I just got more of it. We used some popsicle sticks on the top to make the roof, and we just stained them using a walnut stain, and then we made a door. We tried to make it proportional to the actual Kaaba, and we tried to make the step. The only thing that we didn't do was add the black stone. And also, there aren't any coverings on this right now. Historically, the coverings that you see today, the black with the embroidery, may not have been the same coverings that were during the 700s, 800s, and even during the 1300s when Mansa Musa actually made his Hajj, his pilgrimage. So we did have like a black cloth to put over it, but it didn't look really good. And I'm disappointed in this project because it doesn't really look like the Kaaba, versus the other project that we did really has its historical significance. So that's something that we need to figure out. We did make the bricks more of like a light limestone color, but it's possible they were more gray. We can easily paint over that in order to make it a little bit more authentic. The next thing I want to show you is this book called Safari Animals, Explore Exotic Africa. I really, really enjoyed this book. We've had this in our homeschool library for many years. We picked it up at a warehouse sale for Scholastic Books, and it goes through this journey throughout Africa with this, she is, what is she? Not an anthropologist. Well, anyway, she's on an expedition. Her name is Rebecca. It's all, historical fiction. She's on an expedition and she's taking you through, you're learning about the animals, and what's really cool is that it comes with these little pockets, and then inside comes with all the pieces in order to construct these animals, which is really cool. Now, it's not the most sturdy material, so if you've got a toddler, they will definitely get broken. My children are 9 and 13 now, and even with the play that they do, eventually these are going to bend and not be as durable as they are when they're fresh out of the book. So these are just a sampling of the animals that came with this book. My daughter is playing with the other ones, and then at the back of the book it came with some pieces that you can set up to kind of make it look like a landscape. So this was such a hit. If you can find this book, I highly recommend it. It has tons of information, but what's really great is that you can take that information, or what's a better way to say this? The information is secondary to the hands-on nature of this book. So my children are playing with this book, playing with the pieces of this book, and that really brings this information to life. So I really highly recommend this book. Really loved it. So glad that it found a place in this unit, even though it's not exactly historical, it's more geographical, and it's not even the right geography, but that's okay. I included it, and I really am happy and pleased that I did. All right, I want to show you a couple more projects that we did before I move on to the books. This first one, actually, it's not a project; it's just a drum. It's fair trade, and it is reminiscent, or it is accurate to the drums that were used during the time and maybe even now. So the time period that we studied was definitely the 1300s, and then before that probably we started around the 900s, and I think we went to the 1500s, but I'm actually can't speak accurately about that time period. So these were the drums that we saw pictured in some of the books that we read. This one, for instance, shared some images of the drums, as well as some of the other things that were common at the time. So the Quora, I think that's what this one is still used today. So we just pulled that out, we played with it, and it was just to add more dimension to our unit. Something that I didn't show you when we were putting this unit together were our African-inspired peg dolls. And this project is actually not complete. I'm waiting on some materials to actually dress them and to make some, to the best of my ability, some historically accurate clothing. But we did use a variety of stains in order to stain our wood. We haven't done this before. When I make peg dolls and finger puppets, I always just leave them in the natural wood. But for this project, we went ahead and we used some tea, some coffee, some walnut stain, and a few other things in order to get the coloring, the range of coloring. And there are tutorials on this as well, so you can check those out. And the game that we used for this unit, which I absolutely love, and we have it for Asia, Europe, and North America, or the United States, is the 10 Days game. So this one's 10 Days in Africa, comes with a really nice game board, which is going to be the map of Africa. This is great for learning the geography. This is not a historical map, but that's okay. It's a political map for today, or whenever this was actually made, which I think is still accurate for today. So it comes with the little cards that give some information about the different countries, and then really nice wooden, at least when we bought it, it was wooden. I think now they're plastic game pieces in order to hold your cards. We love this game. We love all the games in this series. We play them often. It's great for just getting to be familiar with the geography of the area. And it's also, well, it's good for geography, it's good for strategy, and it's a great way to kind of bring the kids together or your students together as an opening activity to kind of set the stage for the day. So we try to have as many opening activities that are engaging as possible. And I do love the Professor Noggins games, and I didn't check to see if there were any that were available for Africa, or Africa geography, or safari animals, or for history. But if there was, I would definitely use that. But in the meantime, we use 10 Days in Africa as a way just to invite the kids into that space of learning. We also did a map of Africa using this children's atlas as well as the 10 Days in Africa game. We used our watercolors. We used Winsor Newton watercolors. We used 90-pound Fabriano watercolor paper. And we made it both a physical map as well as a historical map. So we labeled the empires as well as some of the other landmarks and bodies of water and other things. And I think it turned out really beautifully. I'm really happy with that particular project. One more project I want to show you is the homemade chapstick that we made using shea butter, coconut oil, and beeswax. And so we made this so that we could work with shea butter, which is a material that was abundant in Africa, especially in the region that we were studying. So we did a project with shea butter. Okay, moving on to the books. This ended up being one of the best resources for us. This is Mansa Musa, Leader of Mali. And one of the things that I liked about this book is that it gave the phonetic pronunciation, or rather the pronunciation for the words that some of them we knew, but a lot of them we didn't know. And this helped us moving forward when we were reading the other books. We were able to correctly pronounce the words. And I don't remember seeing this in any of the other books. So if you can get that at the beginning of your unit, it will really help you. Otherwise, you just keep tripping over these words. You're probably not going to say them correctly. And then it can be a little embarrassing when you're trying to talk about a historical period and you're completely not saying the names correctly. Okay, so this was an excellent book. It really gave a nice overview, really great illustrations and photographs. And again, being able to pronounce the words correctly was such a bonus. Ashanti to Zulu, African Traditions. This is a book that I pulled in from our own personal library. It goes through the alphabet and then different things related to each letter, which is the word for some different part of either traditions or the people. And so I like this book also because of the illustrations. I found them really captivating, and it's possible that they were done in a way that represents art that's typical of the region, but I can't say for certain. I have to say that a lot of this unit was brand new to me. A lot of the information I didn't know. It was really educational for me. Sunjata, Lion King of Mali. This book we bought after the unit started, so I'm actually not sure if I shared some of these books at the start of this unit, but this is a pretty complete list of all the things that we did. And so this book we added in afterwards because as we read, so we didn't know anything. And what happened was the first two books that we got for our unit was, or I believe we got these two books for our unit. And once we started reading these books, we found there were other, and actually maybe there was this one too, as one of the first ones. Once we read these two books, then we were able to gather more information, more historical biographies. We just learned more about the time period, and then we were able to add more books into this unit. So this was one book that we added after the fact, after our unit got started. And it is a picture book, and what's really great about this picture book, along with some of the other picture books that we have, for example, this one, Mansa Musa, is that they're really beautiful to look at, really interesting illustrations, but they're not just a small picture book. They are a really meaty picture book that's going to give you a lot of information. And I really like books like this because usually the information is easy to digest. It's been written for a younger audience. It's not been watered down. I don't want to use those words, or dumbed down. I don't want to use those two words because I don't feel that that's the nature of a lot of picture books. I find them to be one of the most underrated resources for our units. I find them to be usually really well written, and I love the illustrations. I love being able to look at the illustrations while we're reading, or rather the kids to look while I'm reading. And they're, in my opinion, a lot of them are living books. So either they're written as a narrative or dialogue, or they're just they're written by an author who's most likely passionate about a particular historical time period or a person, and you're getting a nice, rich living book. So do add picture books in as often as you can. I actually want to talk about Mansa Musa because this is one of the other books that we got early on. Now, pretty much all of the resources we really, really liked. Some of the resources were like kind of okay about. This was one that I was kind of okay about. It wasn't, it wouldn't be, if I only could choose like 3 or 4 books for this unit to recommend, I probably wouldn't recommend this one. It's a very interesting story. It goes into things that are a little bit supernatural, a little mystical, so it's hard to know how to incorporate it into the historical unit that we're doing. The illustrations are really beautiful, and it's just the story of Mansa Musa from the time he was a child up until the time he became king. So really nice historical book, but it's mixed in with a lot of things that, in my opinion, did not happen. So it's hard to, for my children, it was a little bit difficult. Like, well, did that happen? Did it not happen? Was that a dream? Was it reality? But anyway, still, because I feel like there aren't a ton of books on this time period written in the English language. I mean, there could be in other languages, but I'm looking for books written in English. There aren't a ton of books that I found in my limited search, and so I would still, to the best of my ability, include as many of these as possible, even if they're not the ones that I could be more choosy if there were a lot more available. Since we are using our educational funding to buy these books, I'm happy to buy as many as I can find. It's easy for us to sort through them. If it didn't work, we're not out. We didn't spend a lot of money. However, I would check libraries, of course, and then discount books. This one was, this is either out of print or it's just not readily available. So that's just something so this was secondhand, something to keep in mind. All right, let me go back to the ones that were really important for our unit before I go into some of the other ones. Mansa Musa, The Empire of Mali. This is one that my son read and then he wrote in his main lesson book. This was really well written. You can see that it's easy to get through. I would put this at maybe 5th or 6th grade level. and he's 13, so this was definitely easy for him to read. I love all the illustrations. The maps are so important. And then, of course, there are other just illustrations throughout. This book was amazing. I highly recommend it. It was a really great overview. It also included some other aspects of the story, or the history, I should say, that then we could add in to this unit that we didn't know before. So you can just start with one book and use that to expand your unit, because I knew nothing about this time period of history in this location at all, and this was the book that started it for us. Another book that I would recommend, but only if you were just dealing with older children, and I would say older elementary, I should specify, is called The Royal Kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. And this book is a little bit more dense, but still a pretty easy read. It does have some photographs and illustrations throughout. This gives a very, in my opinion, complete history of the three major kingdoms or empires in West Africa. So it's got tons of information. And it was really important for us to kind of see that whole trajectory of one empire leading to the next, and who was fighting who and who was the king. So this was another really good book. But because I'm doing this unit with a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, this was directed to my 13-year-old. My 9-year-old didn't really participate in understanding and listening to this book. She was there, she was playing with her safari animals, but it wasn't that I was teaching this to her. So this is definitely junior high or high school level in content and in reading. All right, let's go over a couple more picture books that I just pulled from my own personal library. A lot of these books I picked up from the library bookstore, so they were only like 25 cents or 50 cents, which makes them a really great addition for our homeschool. That way I've got them. I don't need to go to the library and look for them. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to find, and so I'm really happy to have these in our homeschool library, and I was happy to include them in this unit, even though they're not quite the right time period or the right region. How Guinea Fowl Got Her Spots. We have a number of books on African folktales and just different stories that kind of represent the way that a people might explain something in nature or a phenomenon. Folktales really help give a cultural understanding of a people. That's my opinion. So I definitely like to try to include folktales and fairy tales with our units. So this one just was a fun book. I would say, unless you love these kinds of books, just pick them up from the library. Got this one for $0.25. A Story. This is an African tale, and I enjoyed this one. They're just fun to read because they're not the fairy tales and folk tales that we're used to reading, so they're all very interesting for me. And then again, the illustrations, though I can't say for certain, I feel like they're representative of a certain time period or a particular style that is marked by African art. I can't say for sure, I apologize, but that's the feel that I get. So that is this book here. Bringing Rain to Kapiti Plain. This is a book that we've read often in our homeschool. We've done some projects related to this one. I absolutely love the illustrations. They're so gorgeous. My children do not like this book anymore. This is a super awesome book for children, I'd say younger than 7 or 8. This is a kind of book that repeats. Like, you'll have one paragraph or maybe like 3 or 4 sentences, and then the next page repeats the first part and the second part. And the next page after that repeats the first, second, and third part. Or the first, second, and then it brings in the third part. So by the time you're done reading the book, you've repeated sections over and over and over again. This is super awesome for really young children and super irritating for older children and adults. But the story is so nice. It's kind of rhyming in a way. It's kind of poetic in a way. The illustrations are super gorgeous, and I'm with my kids and not liking the repetitive nature of books. I find that for me as an adult a little bit irritating, but for really young children it's supposed to be really interesting for them. The Healing Stream. This is one book that I didn't think that we were going to get to when we started our unit, it turned out to be such an awesome book. I'm so glad that we did it. It's a longer picture book. I didn't think we were going to have the time to go through this considering all the other material that we have, but it ended up being a really wonderful book, and I'm so glad that we read through it. African Animals, ABC. So this is just going to go through different animals that you might find in Africa, and it's a super fun, easy book to read. Really beautiful illustrations, not the kind that I would always go for, but it's nice to mix it up a little bit. Just rich colors, really nicely done, and then it just goes through animals. This is simple. What I really love about this book is that it's really great for a variety of age groups. So this might be great for, say, a kindergartner. You could read it to your kindergartner, or a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old, or even a toddler. But then at the back of the book, it goes through a lot more detail about each animal. And so what we did was, when we were done reading the book itself, every day each of us would choose one animal to expand on, and then we would just read that caption about each of those animals. So we didn't finish the whole book. You can see little pencil marks for the ones that we did. And what we did was, in order to kind of make it a little bit interesting, I would read the information but not read the name of the animal, and then the kids would try to guess what animal it was. And that kind of gives it a fun, less passive way to read a book. It makes it a little bit more active, and it makes, for boys especially, the competition of trying to guess and get points and stuff, that's like really good for them. Maybe for your girls as well, but especially for the boys, when you can turn something into a competition, it makes it a little bit more interesting. So again, I really like this book, especially for the content at the end, so that it made it a little bit more of a rich resource. Also, what was neat was that you could see a lot of animals that were similar to animals that you'd find in other parts of the world, and just kind of comparing those features was interesting for us. Okay, first book about Africa. This one goes into a bit more history of the people. At first, I wasn't super crazy about this book. I don't know, just the feel of it just didn't appeal to me, but it turned out to be a really good book. This is another one that I picked up from the library bookstore for really inexpensively. When I'm at the library bookstore or any thrift bookstore, I look for books that are nonfiction, that can relate to our homeschool, historical books, books on botany or zoology, those kinds of things. I love to have them in our homeschool library so that when we need them, we have them. We don't need to go look for them. We don't need to buy them. We don't need to get them out from the library. And so I do keep a lot of books that we may only use a few times, but the convenience of having them is really important for me. Plus, we generally have the space to store books. And I really love books. So that's why we have so many of them. And the last picture book I want to share with you is a Swahili counting book. This one was so nice to go through. I didn't think that we were going to enjoy it quite so much because it's super simple, but the illustrations are so gorgeous, and they're in this monotone kind of black-white range, and then the writing is with this kind of burnt orange red color. Super gorgeous, really nice, very easy to read, great for younger students. And if you have an older student like I did, we then, as we went through the book, we tried to memorize the numbers and practice them, and tried to find correlations with numbers to help us remember them, so that by the time we were done with the book, we tried to be able to count 1 through 10 on our own. So really, really beautiful book. The last books I want to show you, actually I've got 2 cookbooks, but I want to show you this book. This was a late edition. I found this book at our local library, and at the library bookstore. I believe it was $2, and a little bit more than the books that I typically buy, but that's okay. Look how rich this book is. So many illustrations, so many stories and folktales. And had I gotten this earlier on in the unit, I would have just read one folktale every day as part of our opening activities before we moved into the rest of our lessons. But we got this after our unit had already started, so I had a tab in here somewhere. We probably read only 5 or 6 stories, and we see there's still quite a bit more that we could have read in this book. So I like this one. However, there are lots of African folktale books, so I can't comment deeply on this one compared to other ones. I wouldn't specifically run out and find this one. I would just find whatever one speaks to you, because the folktales, they should be really similar despite the book, that that you've got. Maybe the writing and illustrations might be a little bit different, but the stories themselves should be universal for the African folktales. So whatever one you find, I would pick one up at the library or find one that speaks to you. We love to do cooking as part of our unit, so this time we picked up 2 books. We got a Ghana cookbook and a book on Senegalese cooking. And these ones are kind of near the Mali region, and I can't remember why we didn't get one specifically on Mali, but these are the 2 that we picked up. This one is a really easy, straightforward cookbook. And we did, I think, 2 recipes in here, and we plan to do more. And they're easy to follow. This middle section has some illustrations, really beautiful, or rather photographs that are really beautiful, and they're in color. The rest of the book, there are no pictures for any of the recipes, but the recipes itself are super straightforward. We wanted to include recipes with ingredients that we don't typically use. That was a little bit challenging to do. We were able to find some alternatives to the things that were listed in the book, and they also give alternatives as well. So if you can't find specifically a type of pepper or a type of fish, you can use some alternatives as well. This book is more of like a journey through the region. It's really beautiful, lots of photographs, and then a lot of information from the author. It was as if you're being taken on this journey throughout the country. The photographs are breathtaking, and then of course lots of photographs of food, but then there are going to be some recipes in here as well. I know that we marked some of them that we wanted to do, but this is going to be a completely different experience. It's as if you're being submerged into or immersed in the culture itself. It's just a different experience. Plus, this book was quite a bit more expensive than the Ghana cookbook. So just 2 different experiences, both of them really well done. They each have their purposes. The food that we tried from each of these books was really tasty. There are a couple recipes that we still make that the kids still ask for, but it's my intention to try more of them out, especially ones that include ingredients that we don't typically use in our cooking. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this review. Don't forget, you can check out the blog post that accompanies this video. I've got more pictures and information and links to the books that we used. And if you want to see how our homeschool is progressing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.